The Michigan Man Podcast, episode 191. Michigan basketball prepares for another rugged three-game stretch, and according to the football recruiting gurus, this year's class ranks third in the Big Ten. That and more on this week's show. This is the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to this week's show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. As we put the finishing touches on today's show, the Wolverines are on the road in Columbus for a battle with Ohio State. On our Michigan Game Day segment, our guest today is Wolverine Radio play-by-play voice Matt Shepard. We recorded the interview before the Ohio State game, in which we discussed the Iowa loss on Saturday, but for the most part, we talked about what this Michigan team needs to do if they are going to stay in the Big Ten race. Matt, of course, has a unique perspective on Michigan basketball, and I think you'll enjoy hearing what he has to say. Last Wednesday, Michigan received signed commitments from 16 players. Most observers are saying it was the third best class in the Big Ten, trailing Ohio State and Michigan State. Nationally, well, that's another story. The recruiting sites were all over the map on where this class should be rated. It really doesn't matter, though. Coach Brady Hoke had fewer scholarships to offer, so while the class was small in number, it was very high in quality. The bottom line is, we met our needs. Michigan recruiting analyst Tim Sullivan from the Wolverine and Rivals.com will be with me a little later on our Michigan Game Day Extra segment to round up the class of 2014. In the past few months, we've heard what the recruiting sites have had to say about this class, and most of us have had a chance to see some of their recruiting videos. Tim Sullivan, on the other hand, has seen all of these players in action, in person, during their senior year, some of them maybe 2 or 3 times. He's also talked with their coaches and watched countless hours of video on each recruit. He knows this class inside and out. We'll get to that visit with Tim on Game Day Extra in just a few minutes. By the time this week's show publishes, we'll know what happened in Columbus. Michigan Radio play-by-play voice Matt Shepard told me he thinks the eventual Big Ten champion will only have 3 losses. So the Wolverines don't have much room for error in this coming 3-game stretch. Matt joins me next on Michigan Game Day here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. With us this week is Michigan play-by-play voice Matt Shepard. Matt, great to have you back on the show.
Mike, good to visit with you.
Well, Matt, it didn't take long on Saturday in Iowa to realize the Hawkeyes were in the zone, and it was going to be a long day on the road for Michigan, and it certainly was that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was unfortunate. That's a tough place to win for an opposition. I mean, Iowa's 11-2 on the year, I think because they had lost back-to-back games at home, and they realized that the Big Ten or the race for a possible regular season Big Ten crown was kind of slipping away. If they didn't have that, they kind of came out with a little bit more of a sense of urgency, and to their credit, did everything that was as good as you could have expected. And we saw the Iowa club that was closer to the 9th-ranked team earlier this year than we did the team that had fallen down at home a couple of times.
Well, Matt, for Nick Stauskas, it was his 3rd straight outing of 10 points or less. It looks like the blueprint for Wolverine opponents is you take Stauskas out of the offense and make someone else beat you, which makes sense. Do you think Nick's starting to get a little bit frustrated at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think there are other ways, like Nebraska, for example. He only scored 9 points, but he also had a career-high 8 assists. I think he realizes there are other ways where better or help the team win, defensively, passing the basketball, things like that. Michigan's just got to do a better job of getting him open, setting harder screening. And there are times where Nick Stauskas has got to do a better job of cutting a little bit harder. we're still dealing with 19 and 20-year-old kids that are going to have days like this once in a while. I think the key thing for Nick is if his shot isn't dropping, finding that other area in his game that will help his team still be successful.
Well, one of the other guys is Glenn Robinson III. He's been, inconsistent most of the season. Michigan really does need to find a way to get Glenn's mojo back for that final stretch run, don't they?
Well, there's no question about it. I mean, he was so good against Nebraska. He's had a couple of games where he stumbled a little bit. I know a lot of people feel like he's not performing in big games, and I would strongly disagree with that. I think they forget about some of the defensive things that he does and some of the rebounding that he does. But John Beilein said it after the game on Saturday. Look, he just didn't have a good game. Those things are going to happen. Gary Harris, I think, is the Big Ten preseason player of the year. He's an all Big Ten selection. He's an All-American. He went 3 for 20 on Sunday. At Wisconsin. Does that mean he doesn't perform in big games? No. It means these guys are human. What's going to happen once in a while is their game's going to be off. You got to find a way to stay engaged, and you got to find a way to help your team if your shot's not falling. Glenn Robinson needs to be aggressive. That's the key to his game. When he's aggressive, when he looks for his shot, when he takes it inside, when he doesn't allow teams to defend him the way that Iowa did on Saturday, that's when he's most successful. Even if his shot isn't dropping, at least he can be successful by pounding it on the deck, getting it inside, fighting for a rebound, and giving his team a chance to get an offensive rebound.
Well, Matt, do you think it might be still a little bit of chemistry with Derek Walton Jr. and he? Because it seems last year Glenn got the ball exactly where he wanted it so often from Trey Burke, and that just doesn't seem to be happening this year.
No, I don't think so. I mean, they played with Derek Walton all summer. They practice with him every single day. I don't think it's that situation. I think what's happened more to Glenn Robinson this year than what people expected was at the beginning of the year, John Beilein's lineup was going to be McGarry at the 5, Horford or Morgan at the 4, Robinson at the 3, probably Stauskas at the 2, and Walton at the 1. What Karis LeVert's been able to do this year, his springboard into the starting lineup and consistent play, all-around play, defense, rebounding, assisting, handling the basketball, scoring, has forced Michigan into playing Glenn Robinson at the 4 spot. Again, he's a 6'6" guy playing the power forward when really he should be a 3. And that has kind of forced him into some situations where he's not getting as many looks. Karis LeVert, Nick Stauskas and even Derek Walton sometimes are being more of an option than Glenn Robinson at depending on the matchup and depending on the play that is called. And that has maybe limited some of his touches.
Well, you just mentioned on the bright side, Karis LeVert just continues to improve and impress. It looks like Zach Irvin seeming to find his comfort zone now in his freshman year. If you can keep these guys going, it might be just the ticket to get defenses off Stauskas because it's going to give them just more weapons to worry about moving forward.
Well, there's no question. And that's the case in every basketball team. If other guys are burning you, forcing you to adjust your defense, then maybe they won't be able to do some of the things that they're doing against Nick Stauskas. In other words, what we're saying is Michigan needs to dictate how the defense is going to play them, not the other way around. The way you do that is by having other guys hit their shots. Karis LeVert hit his shots at Iowa. Nobody else did. Tough for anybody, whether it be Nick Stauskas or anybody else, to get going if your team's going to be failing offensively with all the different options that they have.
Well, when Iowa wasn't raining down threes Saturday, they were pounding the glass. 15 offensive boards on the day, 38-29 advantage overall. And
right.
They're the best rebounding team in the Big Ten. We know that.
Yeah, that's their method of operandi. I mean, they average almost 14 offensive rebounds a game. They only had 10 in the first meeting with Michigan, and Michigan also had 10 offensive rebounds. In the first game against Michigan, Iowa won the battle of the glass 33-22. Michigan doesn't care that much about offensive rebounding, and I shouldn't say don't care, but that's not as much their focal point. Their focal point is the defense. They're one of the best teams in the Big Ten defensive rebounding percentage, and that's because they send a lot of guys to the glass, and teams aren't shooting baskets or hitting them all that well, then Michigan's going to get it. Offensive rebounding, Michigan shoots the ball better than anybody else in the Big Ten going into the game against Iowa. So there's not as many offensive rebounds to be had, and they're not going to throw their guards toward the glass on the offensive side and get possibly caught on a run-out and transition defense. So I think that's where the difference is. The problem for Michigan is they weren't hitting their shots against Iowa in the second meeting like they did in the first, where they shot 50%.
So you don't think the rebounding thing, especially on the offensive end, is that big of a deal right now?
No, not really. I think Michigan's going to get beat on the glass just about every single game. I mean, when you're playing Arizona and you're playing Duke and you're playing Michigan State and you're playing Iowa, teams like that, they're known for their rebounding. Michigan has been able to keep it close. As long as the Wolverines are playing solid defense, they're not giving up the offensive glass, then I think they're going to be okay. Because without the offensive rebounds, you're not getting those putbacks. Michigan's getting that chance to get out and run. And I think that's where their primary focus is right now. And they did it really well against Iowa. They did it really well against Nebraska. They did a really good job against Purdue, and Purdue's one of the better offensive rebounding teams. They're the number one offensive rebounding team in the Big Ten. So the formula has worked for them so far. It just didn't work for them on Saturday because their shots weren't dropping, and Iowa was hitting some pretty big shots, especially Roy Devin Marble.
Our guest here on our Michigan Game Day segment this week, Michigan play-by-play voice Matt Shepard from the Michigan Basketball Network. Matt, big week this week. It's on the road at Ohio State, back for Wisconsin over the weekend, and then a week later, Michigan State. An incredibly brutal stretch, isn't it?
Yeah, it's similar to the stretch, Mike, we saw earlier this year where Michigan had to go to Wisconsin, then they hosted Iowa, and then they had to go to Michigan State. I don't know who's making the schedule, but these two stretches are as tough as I've seen in all my years calling Michigan for any team. So the Wolverines get those three guys in a row, and they come out unscathed. They start this next four-game stretch with a loss at Iowa. They go to Ohio State. They only play the Buckeyes once this year, and it's in Columbus tomorrow night. And then they come home for Wisconsin. Wisconsin felt good about their win against Michigan State, but they have not played very well on the road. Michigan seemed to have the formula to beat them at the Kohl Center earlier this year. Let's see if they could sweep them. And then Michigan State will come loaded for bear. I would expect at least Keith Appling back by then. They've got a healthy Adrian Payne, who's an absolute monster and a mismatch for just about every team in the conference. So that game, a week from this Sunday, will be one that I would guess everybody would want to watch.
What do you think about two of the next three have to be wins to keep us in the race?
Yeah, I think the winner of the Big Ten is going to have three losses. So, where you can afford that final loss, I'm not sure. If Michigan can't pull out a win Tuesday night in Columbus, then they better make sure they beat Michigan State. So, because I don't think Michigan State's going to lose in either of their next two games. So, but I've been wrong before, Mike. I mean, I didn't think Northwestern would go into Wisconsin and win. I sure didn't think Penn State would go into Ohio State and win. So we've seen some surprises already in the Big Ten this year.
It's been amazing. I know you haven't seen everyone in the conference yet, but do you think the Big Ten is better this year than it was even last season?
I don't, but the coaches who I talked to, Fran McCaffrey just the other day, Tom Crean last week, the Michigan coaches, Tom Izzo, I've asked them all the same question. They think it is. They think the indication that Northwestern and Nebraska and Penn State have pulled upsets this year shows you just how deep the conference is compared to last year. I just think this team last year was a lot more top-heavy. When you had Michigan, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, even Minnesota. I think Minnesota had more talent last year than they do this year. I think Ohio State was better last year than they are this year. I think Illinois was better last year than they are this year. So, I think Northwestern and Nebraska have improved for sure, but I don't think the other teams are quite as deep. I thought the Big Ten was deeper last year than this season.
Well, despite the rash of injuries that they've suffered in East Lansing, do you still think Michigan State is probably the best team in this conference?
Well, I've been blown away at their ability to hang in games, even if they're not winning, outside of the North Carolina game. I mean, they hung with Michigan. Even though they lost, they hung with Wisconsin on Sunday, even though they lost by 2. I think they're a team that has great resolve. I respect their resolve. I respect their physicality. They're in games because of their defense and their rebounding. I don't think they're a very good shooting team, even though their numbers would kind of indicate otherwise. But I think they're a team that if they're not shooting the ball well, they could stay in games because of the other two areas. Whereas a lot of teams in this conference, if they're not shooting well, they have a chance to get blown out of a game. I'm not sure if that's the situation for Michigan State. So if you're going to beat the Spartans, you better be able to win games late. You better be able to hang on. You better be able to get some key stops. To their credit, Michigan has been able to do that. They've had a tight game with Minnesota. They've had a tight game with Arizona, even though they didn't win. They had a tight game with Wisconsin and took care of business. So and Nebraska on the road as well. Michigan has that formula to win and win late because they have proven it not only this year but last year as well.
Well, we better buckle up for the stretch run then, because it is going to be one bumpy ride until early March, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is, but it's fun. I mean, that's the reason we love college basketball so much.
Absolutely. My guest today has been the radio play-by-play voice of Michigan basketball, Matt Shepard. And as always, Matt, thanks for your time. And we look forward to hearing you and Terry Mills the rest of the way on the Michigan Basketball Network, and hope to get you back later in the season.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for the visit.
As I mentioned to you last week, we were going to let the dust settle on National Signing Day, and then this week and next week take a look at this class of 2014 in detail. On our Michigan Game Day Extra segment, we're going to be joined next by recruiting analyst Tim Sullivan from the Wolverine and Rivals.com to round up the class of 2014. Here on the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. With us this week to help round up the 2014 recruiting class is the recruiting editor from the Wolverine, Tim Sullivan. Tim, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
A busy day with National Signing Day, but not a lot of drama surrounding this class, was there, Tim?
No, it's been a pretty busy day most years, and this year it certainly was not.
And no surprise signees. I guess the only thing people were, kind of waiting to see was Malik McDowell going to commit to Michigan, but I don't know. Down the stretch, the last few days, it did not look like he was coming, did it?
No, there were some moments where maybe it looked like he might end up still considering Michigan. Michigan had been his favorite earlier in the process, so you never know if it's going to end up that way. But in the end, the kid wanted Michigan State. He still hasn't signed. He committed to Michigan State on signing day. Still hasn't signed. But I would be surprised, barring some pretty significant changes in his personal attitude, if he did end up signing anywhere other than Michigan State.
Well, what we do know is we picked up 16 commitments, a very nice class. And let's take a look, Tim. Let's just work down the list in no particular order and get your take on these kids and if we can expect immediate results or if they're a project. And let's start with Freddie Canteen, who's one of these really speedy guys. The time I see is a 4.440. He's a 6'1", 170-pounder. He's out of Elkton, Maryland, Eastern Christian Academy.
Yeah, he's a slot receiver. He kind of can do a little bit of everything. He can play any of the three receiver positions Jeff Heklinski mentioned. And he has a little more size than we've seen in the slot. He's not your shorter Drew Dilio type or Martavius Odom. So he brings size, but he still has that route running ability and that ability after the catch that you really like to see. And since he's enrolled early, I think he's somebody that really could make an impact as a freshman because Michigan is looking for receiving options this year.
And that speed that you see everywhere listed is 4.4. Is that pretty legit as far as you know?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's a blazer, but I think every 40 time you see out there is exaggerated for pretty much every kid except for the ones that are the laser times, combine times. But in terms of compared to all the other guys that run a 4.4, he might be right up there.
Well, we brought in another big offensive lineman to help stock the cupboard, Mason Cole. He's a 6'5", 284-pounder. He's out of Tarpon Springs, Florida, East Lake High School. A lot of potential there.
Yeah, I really like Mason Cole a lot. I went down to Florida to see him play this fall. He's probably an interior lineman most naturally, or maybe a right tackle. He's not going to be the true blindside tackle. He doesn't have that super long reach that you like to see out of your blindside tackle there, but he moves pretty well, and he's a really aggressive run blocker, which is obviously something that Brady Hoke and his assistant coaches really like. They want to see those tough-nosed sort of kids, and Cole definitely brings that type of attitude.
And he's another one of the early enrollees, but are we expecting probably a red shirt for Mason?
Yeah, I think so. Michigan managed to redshirt every guy from the 2012 class. Only one guy from the 2013 class, Kyle Bosch, didn't redshirt. I think they have enough talent in the cupboard that unless they really struggle on the offensive line, which they might because they did last year, I think pretty much every guy from the offensive line going forward will redshirt unless they have a situation where they just don't have the depth in a given year. But with 6 last year, 5 of whom redshirted, I think there's enough to be able to redshirt Cole.
Well, the receiver we're all waiting to see. We've been hearing about him for what it seems like years and years. Drake Harris, 6'4". They list him at 170 pounds out of Grand Rapids Christian High School. Another early enrollee, Tim.
Yeah, he's a kid that actually didn't play football his senior year. He had a hamstring injury that he suffered over the summer, and he tried to come back a couple times. But he came back a little too early and re-aggravated it both times that he tried to come back, so he was unable to play his senior year. But as a junior, he showed what he's capable of. 2019 receiving yards as a junior, which is a state record. It's one of, I think, 12 kids to pull that stunt nationally. So he showed that he has the ability, particularly the speed. He's a great downfield receiver. He can win jump balls. He's a former basketball player, so he has that jump ball ability that you like to see out of those sorts of guys. But he has great speed, too, and he can really run after the catch. He's kind of a do-it-all type of receiver, and he's a versatile sort of guy, and he's a real playmaker, and that's what Michigan has probably needed with Jeremy Gowan graduating. They need that guy who can really excite people on the edges.
So it depends what happens, of course, in spring ball with him being an early enrollee, but he's going to get every chance to get on the field this year, isn't he?
Yeah, he's finally getting back to health. What Brady Hoke mentioned at his press conference on signing day, so he should be able to be fully healthy by spring ball, and, if he's able to go through everything, doesn't have a recurrence of the hamstring issue, I almost don't see a way that this kid doesn't get on the field as a freshman, because he really does provide that spark that the receiving game could really use.
Well, we brought in another big quarterback into the fold. We haven't seen one this big in a while. 6'6", 243-pounder Wilton Spate. Wilton is out of Richmond, Virginia, the collegiate school Big Arm.
Yeah, he reminds a lot of people, including his quarterbacks coach, Steve Clarkson, who's kind of a quarterbacks guru, of Ben Roethlisberger from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's that big, tall, hefty kind of quarterback, but who still has a lot of mobility, kind of a surprising mobility for the size that he has. He can get the ball downfield. He doesn't have the biggest arm and maybe the intermediate passing game, but he can push it downfield. And he really does remind me of Roethlisberger in the times that I've seen State play. He really does kind of have that similar style where he can keep plays alive in the pocket or maybe run for a few yards himself. The sort of guy that might take a couple years to get into Michigan's offense and learn it, but most quarterbacks are going to end up redshirting as long as Michigan doesn't need them to play immediately. And with Devin Gardner returning, Shane Morris, who started the bowl game, returning, I think they should probably get a chance to redshirt State unless he really knocks some socks off in spring ball and kind of moves up the depth chart quickly.
And he's a kid a couple of years ago when he committed to Michigan. I won't say he was off the radar, but a lot of people said, who is this guy? But he really skyrocketed up in the rating service and then at the All-Star games in the last year, didn't he?
Yeah, he's the sort of guy where Michigan was in on a couple really highly rated guys, but they chose not to offer those guys. They offered Spate, and he immediately committed. This was Michigan's hand-picked choice. Now, that was under a different offensive coordinator when Al Borges was still in town, so it's unclear whether he would have been their hand-picked choice if Nussmeier had been the offensive coordinator when they made the decision. But it's clear that this is a kid that the Michigan coaching staff has seen. And that includes Brady Hoke. Al Borges is the only assistant coach who's gone. So Brady Hoke certainly saw enough in this kid to definitely say, that's going to be our guy over five-star David Cornwell, who signed with Alabama, or high four-star Michael O'Connor, who signed with Penn State. Spade is their guy, and I think that he's a sort of kid that certainly long-term is a sort of guy you can see why they chose him. He has the attitude, he has the intangibles, and getting his football skills back. He had a pretty severe shoulder injury as a sophomore in high school, so he's been kind of working back to what he could do before that in terms of arm strength, in terms of accuracy. Once he's fully back, I think that's something that you'll see exactly what the Michigan coaching staff really likes about him.
Well, another tall receiver brought in, Maurice Way, is a local kid. He's 6'3", 192 pounds. He's from Beverly Hills, Michigan, played at Country Day. Another one of the guys, the kind of those tall guys we want. Yeah,
the thing about Wade is he's very physical. He's the sort of guy, Jeff McClinsky always talks about wanting guys who are willing to block on the edge, and he definitely has that in Wade. I think he's probably going to play at well above 200 pounds. He has a frame to put on a lot more weight, even though he's already tipping the scales at 190. And he uses his physical skills really well in the receiving game, too. He can win a jump ball kind of like Harris, but he's able to box out defenders more, and he has pretty sure hands after a junior year where he was sometimes plagued with the drop. See if he really worked on that during the off season, really improved, and he's becoming a more complete receiver. He's not the speedster that Harris is or that Canteen is, but with those two in the fold, you need the guy that can bring the physical aspect too.
And he's a guy that Michigan got in on early, and again was not one of those highly regarded recruits, but they've had their eyes on him for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think he's the guy who's going to end up being the sleeper of the class. They looked at him as a junior and kind of thought, he's somebody that we're going to keep our eye on, but he drops a few passes. He really worked, and he picked up offers from Pitt, Rutgers, a few other schools before Michigan finally came calling him. When they did issue that offer, it was one that they knew he was going to accept. So they were very careful in making sure that they were positive that they wanted to offer him, and they offered him, and within a couple of days he was a Wolverine.
Well, another big offensive lineman brought in, Jawan Bushel-Beatty from Paramus, New Jersey, Paramus Catholic. Big kid, 6'5", 295 pounds.
Yeah, and some of those 295 pounds are going to have to reshape a little bit through the strength and conditioning program, but he's definitely a road grader. When I saw him play this year and then again at the Under Armour All-Star game, this is a kid that can move pretty much any defensive lineman off the ball in the run game. He's not going to be overpowered by anyone. He might need to work on his foot quickness, keeping pass rushers off of his quarterback around the edge, but that's something that as he gets into the strength and conditioning program, maybe trims up some of the belly and turns it into leg strength instead. He'll be somebody that can move a little bit better, and he can definitely continue to overpower guys. And that's somebody that, like Mason Cole, has that attitude where he just wants to finish the defender across from him, and that's a perfect fit for Michigan.
Well, the last of the commitments on offense, and there were 7 of those, is a guy who I've seen some film on who's very interesting, a tight end, Ian Bunting, 6'7", 223 pounds right now.
He's somebody that plays wide receiver in high school. He's actually kind of a lot like Maurice Wade in terms of his ability to block on the edge. Obviously, Bunting's somebody that's going to have to continue putting on weight to be able to block from the line of scrimmage. He's going to be blocking defensive ends and linebackers when he gets to college, not cornerbacks and safeties. But he has the receiving ability of a tight end that really, really excites you. He's not quite Devin Funchess in that aspect. He doesn't have Devin Funchess' top-end speed, but very few tight ends. Like a lot of wide receivers don't have that type of speed, but he has the ability to go up and get the ball, hands like glue, and he's somebody that's very willing to do what it takes to succeed. He didn't block a whole lot as a junior in high school. When I saw him this fall, he only blocked pretty much. Their starting quarterback was injured, so they were playing a fullback at quarterback. So when number 40 is your quarterback, you aren't throwing a whole lot of passes. But Bunting was still willing to do whatever it took for his team to move the ball.
Oh, he's one of these kids, we don't need him right away, but you've got to like the upside with him.
Yeah, especially since the emergence of Jake Butt last year along with Funchess. A.J. Williams has obviously gotten some action in the past couple of years, and you have like Clint Hill coming off a red shirt. You have the tight end stock to really allow Bunting to put on weight before he's expected to contribute, and that's something that if you could have done that a couple of years ago with Devin Funchess and allowed him to just concentrate on bulking up, getting ready for to learn the offense, and getting ready academically to kind of set himself up for future years. It might not have taken Funchess, half of a season or even just more than a season to blossom. It's something that now that you have the tight end roster already built up, you'll see Bunting be able to, be that 245-pounder by the time he does hit the field, and he'll be physically ready to play. I think probably after a redshirt year, but if his receiving ability is so good this year that you need to get him on the field, they'll be able to do it in ways that his lower mass at this point doesn't harm them at all.
With us on our recruiting roundup show this week is Tim Sullivan. Tim is the recruiting editor at the Wolverine. Tim, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Some really nice players in this group. And let's start with I believe the first commitment in this class, Michael Fern, 6'3", 235. He's out of St. Clairsville, Ohio, St. Clairsville High School. He looks like he's almost ready to go.
Yeah, when I first saw Ferns, it was actually after he had committed, but more than a year before most of the guys in this class who I saw in person as seniors. I saw Ferns the first game of his junior year, and he's a big, fast linebacker. He's more of your classic inside guy. He's not going to be covering receivers downfield. He can play forward, play the run. He can get out and play the run on the edge, too, a little bit better than people expect him to be able to. What's interesting is he's actually a really talented tight end and fullback. Alabama actually had offered him as a tight end, not as a linebacker. So he has that athleticism to really help stretch the field downfield there. So as he develops that athleticism on the defensive side of the ball, learns how to move laterally a little bit better, something that he'll be able to do now that he's enrolled early. He'll have a better understanding of Michigan's defense, and that's something that, even though he's a pretty finished product, you don't see a whole lot of 235-pound high school linebackers. He still has some upside and something that he'll be able to tap into.
Well, right, and he is, as you mentioned, an early enrollee, so he's in a position group that's very strong. So unless he's just off the charts, probably a redshirt year, wouldn't you guess?
It's interesting because linebacker is one of those positions where you can throw in a guy on special teams because those are the body types that you need on kick coverage, on punt coverage, and even in the punt return and kick return game. You need bodies like that, and if he's so athletic that you can't keep him off the field, he can play a little special teams and work in on defense. But I think the luxury of redshirting him is certainly there if the Michigan coaching staff really wants to do that, because they do have that linebacker depth built up over the past few classes.
Well, his next kid is a big defensive tackle. Not sure how you pronounce the last name, so help me on this, Tim. Is it Brian Monet?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, well, he's 6'4". They list him at 328 pounds. He's out of Salt Lake City, Highland High School. He is one big kid.
Yeah, at the Under Armour All-America game, this was a kid, he's a spark plug in the middle. You're not moving him off the ball. I mentioned earlier that Juwan Bushell-Beatty at that game was somebody who could move pretty much anybody off the ball. Brian Monet might have been the one exception because he's just so massive. Kind of like Bushell-Beatty, he's going to have to work on shaping his body a little bit, but he mentioned on the signing day show on MGoBlue.com that he's already trimmed about 15 pounds. Came in at over 340, and he said he's about 325 right now. That's something that I think since he's enrolled early, Michigan might be able to use him with the help of Andre Pipkins, who hurt himself halfway through the year last year. There's playing time available at defensive tackle, and Monet is going to have to really learn the defense quickly and potentially see the field as a true freshman.
Well, another early enrollee is defensive back Brandon Watson. He's 5'11". He's 185 pounds. He's out of Elkton, Maryland, Eastern Christian Academy High School. Another good-looking defensive back.
Yeah, he's kind of a tough defender. He really likes to play press coverage. He's not the most gifted turn and run sort of guy, but he does have good top-end speed. He's the sort of kid that is more of a recovery speed and jam sort of guy. Maybe more like a Raymond Taylor out of the defensive backs that Michigan currently has. He does have the size already. I think about 185 pounds to eventually move to safety. He's pretty well put together. And since Michigan didn't bring in a true safety in this class, I think that could be his long-term future if that's something that he's really interested in, because he certainly does have the physical tools to work in at that position.
Well, a linebacker in this group who was an early commit, and I think before he committed to Michigan, he was very interested in Ohio State, Chase Vinovich. He's 6'3", 216 pounds. Another very good linebacker from Thomas Jefferson High School in Clairton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, he's a kid that I think his friendship with Ferns really helped Michigan out. St. Clairsville, Ohio isn't so far from the Pittsburgh area where Winovich is from. Those two built a pretty good bond, including at the Pittsburgh Rivals camp last spring. And Winovich really did credit Ferns with making him feel comfortable every time he came to Michigan, and that's something that helped him end up in this class. Even though he did grow up an Ohio State fan, he is in Pitt's backyard, and those were the other two schools in his top three when it came down to it. The relationships at Michigan and the opportunity to play for Mark Smith and Brady Hoke and Greg Madison was just something that he really wanted to see.
Well, we brought another defensive lineman in, Tim, Brady Pallant. Seems a bit undersized, but you know, who knows with these weights. 6'1", 255, out of Naples, Florida, Barron Collier High School.
I went down to Florida and saw him play, and he's a kid that's just a two-star kind of guy, but he has that hard-nosed, high work ethic kind of attitude, similar personality to Brady Hoke. It's easy to see why Brady Hoke likes the kid. He just wants to get out there and play football. He's not worried about the hype. He's not worried about this. He's not worried about that. He's going to have to get bigger by the time he hits the field in college, but he's a high school wrestler. They always seem to know how to play with great leverage. The Florida 4A state champion as a junior, in fact. So he definitely has the talent to move guys off the ball as long as he learns how to translate from the wrestling mat to the football field. And that's something that I saw this fall that he's working on. He's going to have to get bigger, but he certainly has the potential to make an impact as an upperclassman.
Well, the crown jewel of this class, no question, is Jabril Peppers. And Jabril 6'1", 210 pounds from Paramus, New Jersey, Paramus Catholic, where he was a teammate of Juwan Bushell-Beatty. And everyone is waiting to see the comparisons to Charles Woodson are out there. Everyone anxiously awaits him getting here in August.
I'm not going to say he's the next Charles Woodson, but I'm definitely going to say that if you're looking for a Michigan player to compare him to in the past, that's about as closely comparable player as you can get. He has just that unbelievable athleticism, pretty good size for a cornerback. He's not every bit of his listed 6'1", but he has good height, very good build. He's well put together. He's not the sort of kid that they're going to get in the weight room and say, oh, do this many reps of the weight that you want you to do, and he's not going to be able to do it. The kid's a gym rat. Unbelievable athleticism. I think there was a play in the state semifinal game on a kick return against, I believe it was against his former school, Don Bosco Prep, and you can time it on the YouTube video. It's less than 9 seconds he gets from goal line to goal line, which is just unbelievable speed. He can really do it all. Very physical, very fast. There's a reason he's a 5-star and the number 3 player in the country, and he's just that good.
Well, we know what he is on both sides of the ball, and there's talk, maybe not in the first year, but of him eventually getting on, special teams, returning punts, or maybe being used on the offensive side. That's all very possible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something I think, far be it from me to tell the Michigan coaches what to do. I think they'd be doing themselves a disservice to not give the kid a chance on special teams and on offense, because he really does have special ability with the ball in his hands. He's just a true football player. He really can do it all, and they should give him a chance to do that and see exactly how much he can help the team in all 3 phases.
Well, we're all waiting to see this kid, no doubt about it. Another linebacker in this class, Tim Noah Furbush, 6'4", 229 pounds, very nice size, from Kenton, Ohio, Kenton High School.
He's a big kid, as you mentioned. He played most of this fall with an enormous cast on his hand. He actually learned halfway through last basketball season that he had broken a bone in his hand, and he said, you know what, I'm not getting surgery because that might make me miss part of next football season. So he was planning to get surgery after the football season, and he didn't allow the cast to hamper him one bit. He also plays a little bit of tight end and fullback for his high school team. I don't imagine they threw him the ball very much with the cast on his hand. But he's one of those kids who's kind of just a football player, a lot like Brady Palante. Obviously, better size for his position than Palante, but he has that attitude where he just wants to get out there and play. He doesn't care about the hype. He doesn't care about the stars, any of that. He just wants to play football. He loves the game. And he's the sort of attitude that Brady Hoke and his coaches really like to have.
Well, we're stocking the shelves in this class with linebackers. The next one is a Michigan legacy, Jared Wangler, 6'2", 215, and Jared comes from De La Salle High School in Warren, Michigan.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have probably heard of his brother Jack, right? That's what you mean by Michigan legacy, huh?
Yeah.
Obviously his dad John has a place in Michigan lore with the Wangler to Carter play. Jack, freshman walk-on wide receiver last year, but Jared it's interesting because Jack earned that preferred walk-on spot, and it looked like Jared might be a preferred walk-on type of priority for Michigan. He ended up getting offers from Penn State and Michigan State and had committed to Penn State. But when the Michigan offer came, a kid from the Wangler family wasn't going to turn down the Michigan offer, and he accepted it pretty much immediately. He played mostly safety for his team this year, but he did play linebacker last year, so he's going to have to put back on some of that size to move back down into the box as a linebacker. But the ability to play safety shows off his athleticism, and I think that's what the Michigan coaches really liked out of him. It's not just because he has that famous Michigan name. He really does have the ability on the field, too.
If he's really 215 pounds, he's bigger than Jack. Is that weight pumped up a little bit?
When I talked to him just after the end of his senior season, he said, I was 218 a week ago. I'm about 216 now. So he's pretty candid about it. I don't think that's something that they're going to pump up. He's going to have to get probably about 15, 20 pounds bigger to really play the linebacker position at Michigan. So he still has a long ways to go, but the weight is certainly there. And he's another one of those kids who's just a gym rat. The Wanglers have a gym at their house, and he and his brother and all their friends. Shane Morris was their high school teammate, and Shane's younger brother, Brent, who signed with Grand Valley on signing day, are always over there working out. So he's a gym rat, and I think he should be able to put on the weight. It's about getting the work in.
Well, the last of this class of 16, another very talented kid, defensive end Lawrence Marshall. Lawrence, another one of these bruisers, 6'4", 230 pounds out of Southfield, Michigan, Southfield High School.
Yeah, he's a kid that, gosh, I've seen a lot of these kids a lot of times, but I maybe have seen him the most. I saw him about 4 times during his junior year and just about all of his games during his senior year, and he got a lot better over the course of that process. During his junior year, I kind of thought, oh, this is a kid, that might be a nice player for a mid-level Big Ten school or maybe one of the best MAC schools, and he just continued to get bigger, continued to get better. He has great speed off the edge. He still is learning a variety of pass rush moves to beat blockers, but he definitely has a great speed move and a great counter move to the inside. It's just a matter of adding a spin move, adding some power moves so he can just run right over a guy. But he has the physical tools to certainly make an impact in the pass rush.
Well, Tim, in this class, small numbers, we all know, very high quality, but just 16 scholarships offered. And it seems, depending on the rating service that you look at, they're all over the map on this class. Why do you think that is?
I think the the services value class size differently. With Rivals, only the top 20 guys in a given class count, but a school like Tennessee has 32 signees, I believe. So, they have 12 guys on the lower end of their class that don't count towards the rankings. Whereas with Michigan, the number 16 guy in the class is the last guy in the class. So Brady Palante is a 2-star, but whereas Tennessee might have 8 2-stars, they just don't count on the lower end of the class. I think it's something that you see reasons for both methods of kind of worrying more about average star ranking to not punish teams that bring in smaller classes. But at the same time, there is value to bringing in a lot of guys, too, because you have more bodies available. You have more opportunities for some guys to work out if others don't. And I think at the end of the day, after 2 really good classes in a row, the Michigan coaching staff isn't going to sweat being ranked, I think, number 29 or so in the country, according to Rivals. I think that's something that they're totally fine with. They just want to continue building not only classes with talent, but classes with the sort of character they want, and they've certainly done that with this one.
All in all, it was not a bad day for the Big Ten. Ohio State ranked in the top 5 in just about everyone's service. Great year for Michigan State again. Of course, we know what we just talked about, the Michigan class. Probably the most surprising class to me of all was Penn State's, though. They had a heck of a year.
Yeah, it's interesting because they were putting together a really good class under Bill O'Brien before he left to become a head coach of the Houston Texans, and now it might have even gotten better once they picked up James Franklin to replace O'Brien. He grabbed a lot of guys who had been committed to him at Vanderbilt and kept a lot of the best guys from O'Brien's class. It's really something. I think the reduction of the sanctions that we saw from the NCAA earlier in the fall really helped there. But it's 2 really good recruiting head coaches in a row, and then I think that's the bigger factor for Penn State. And I think once you see their sanctions completely go off the books in a couple of years, there'll be a recruiting power in the Big Ten, and they're not going away anytime soon.
They're doing a great job there. And as we said, pretty good job in the upper tier of the Big Ten. Last year, Urban Meyer made a comment after the recruiting season. The Big Ten had to do a better job overall from top to bottom recruiting. What about the rest of the conference?
I think you saw some surprisingly good recruiting classes. Indiana's one of them. Northwestern, I think, only had 15 spots, so even fewer than Michigan, and they still put together a pretty good class. So you're seeing the depth get built up a little bit. Obviously, the Purdue's of the world, even Illinois to a certain extent, they're never going to be those top 50 classes unless they replace somebody in a middle tier of the Big Ten or an upper tier of the Big Ten. But it's something that you're seeing greater depth built, and I think obviously there was a certain self-serving reason behind Urban Meyer's comments, but there was legitimacy to it as well. Still, though, you see, I think 5 of the top 7 recruiting classes in the SEC, so it's something that the Big Ten is still going to lag behind a little bit in, but they're certainly improving to compare to some of the other conferences around the country, and I think that's something that will help them be more competitive going forward.
Well, Tim, the 2014 class is signed and in the bank. When do you think we're going to start getting offers out there for the class of 2015?
Michigan already has 4 commitments in the 2015 class, and it's going to be another small one. They actually had 6 at the end of the football season. They've lost a couple of high-profile guys. and Florida wide receiver George Campbell, who's actually a high school teammate of Mason Cole, and Kentucky running back Damian Harris. They still stand a pretty good chance to bring in one or both of those guys back. But that class with 6 guys, like it had, was nearly halfway full with the number of scholarships they have for next year. It might even be a slightly smaller class than this year, although they did end up saving a couple scholarships because they didn't land Malik McDowell, who we talked about earlier. So could be at about the same range, maybe a little smaller, maybe a little bigger. But we've seen the 2015 class already make some pretty big moves, and I think they'll continue doing that over the course of the winter here. I think they're really going to push for some guys, and we'll probably see some more commits by the time the spring game rolls around.
As always, the recruiting season now it's year-round, isn't it?
Absolutely. It never stops. Michigan already has a 2016 commit. In fact, there's just, once you fill your 2014 class, there's no hesitation. You just continue moving on to the next one. And once you fill the 2015 class, no hesitation. You keep moving on. It just is a cycle that really never ends. And in this day and age of college recruiting, coaches know that if they're not working on the future classes, if they're not working on the current class, there always is something that you can do to be a successful recruiter. And college coaches have to do that nowadays.
Our guest here in our recruiting Roundup show this week has been Tim Sullivan, who is the recruiting editor at the Wolverine. Tim, as always, it's great to have you on the show, and if anything pops up as far as big recruits here in the next couple of months, we'll get you right back on the show and talk.
Good, thanks for having me, Mike.
It was another very busy week on the Michigan athletic scene, and we'll take a look at that next on Wolverine Quick Hits as we wrap it up for another week here on the Michigan Man Podcast on GBMW Go Blue, Michigan Wolverine. On Wolverine Quick Hits today, last week Coach Brady Hoke said he told all of his assistant coaches during their reviews they had to do a better job of coaching and developing their position groups. Coach Hoke didn't exclude himself from that criticism. He said that he too must do a better job. He said that his staff has been coaching for a long time and they already know that. Spring practice gets underway in just 2 weeks and there will be a lot to work on as the preparations for next season get underway. The University of Michigan women's basketball team led by 14 points in the first half, but 2 big three-pointers by number 25 Purdue in the last 142 of the game gave the Boilermakers a 65-56 victory on Sunday afternoon at Chrysler Center. Junior forward Saisha Gori turned in her 8th double-double of the season with 12 points and 11 rebounds, to go with 4 assists in 27 minutes. Senior forward Val Driscoll went for 10 points and 7 rebounds, and freshman guard Sierra Thompson joined Driscoll with 10 points while adding 4 boards. Sophomore guard Madison Ristovsky had 9 points on 3 three-pointers and dished out 3 assists, while junior guard Shannon Smith had 4 assists on the day. Michigan stays at Chrysler Center for its next contest, welcoming Nebraska tomorrow night. Tip is slated for 7 p.m. The Wolverines now 15-9 overall, 6-5 in the Big Ten. The 10th-ranked University of Michigan hockey team had its 5-game unbeaten streak snapped in a 4-0 loss Saturday night at Penn State, which scored 3 goals in a 10-minute span in the first period en route to a 4-0 win. It was Penn State's first Big Ten victory in program history. Michigan will hit the road this weekend for its first Big Ten series against nationally ranked Minnesota at Mariucci Arena in Minneapolis, starting with a Friday night puck drop at 8 p.m. The Wolverines heading into that action 14-7-3 overall, 6-3-1 in the Big Ten. The number 5 ranked University of Michigan softball team swept its doubleheader on Sunday against Illinois State 7-1 and 12-1 over Bethune-Cookman in 5 innings on the strength of a pair of 15 hit attacks, including 5 from senior Lindsey Doyle against ISU on the final day of the USF Wilson Demarini tournament. The Wolverines will be back in action this Friday against Memphis and Louisiana Lafayette in their first visit to the Ragin' Cajun Invitational in Lafayette, Louisiana. First pitch against Memphis is slated for 1 p.m. The Wolverines start the season at 3-1 heading into this week's action and still ranked number 5. Baseball will also get into action this weekend down in Florida. The number 6 ranked University of Michigan women's gymnastics team traversed through some tightly scored routines to keep its perfect dual meet record intact, defeating number 14 Illinois on Friday at Huff Hall in Champaign-Urbana. Senior Joanna Sampson won the all-around for the 5th time in as many meets this season. She also took top honors on floor exercise. Senior Shelby Geese won a pair of events, taking first on balance beam while tying for first on uneven bars with freshman Nicole Arts. The other event winner was junior Sachi Sugiyama, who won the vault. The Wolverines head to Lincoln, Nebraska this Friday to take on 2-time defending Big Ten champion Nebraska in what could be the determining meet for the Big Ten regular season championship. The meet will begin at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time and will be televised by tape delay on the Big Ten Network. The Wolverines heading into that meet 8-0 overall, 3-0 in the Big Ten. The number 11 ranked University of Michigan wrestling team could not capitalize on several close early matches, falling at number 3 Iowa 26-6 in its final Big Ten Conference dual meet last Sunday in front of 8,354 fans at Carver Hawkeye Arena. The Wolverines dropped 4 matches by just 3 points or less, including in 3 of the opening 5 bouts. Senior Steve Dutton and freshman Adam Kuhn earned decision wins for Michigan at 141 pounds and heavyweight respectively. Michigan will wrap up its 2013-14 dual meet schedule this Saturday, traveling to Pittsburgh to face Pitt, and they are currently ranked number 6, the dual meet taking place at Fitzgerald Fieldhouse on the Pitt campus. The Wolverines heading into that action 10-4 overall, 6-2 in the Big Ten. Well, the class of 2014 is signed, sealed, and delivered, but that doesn't mean there isn't recruiting news to talk about. Become a member here at GBMW, and we'll keep you updated on what's happening with the class of 2015, and yes, even the class of 2016. Visit www.gbmwolverine.com today and sign up for free membership. There is a lot going on this winter. We have men's and women's basketball heading down the stretch, hockey in the thick of the Big Ten race, and of course, spring football is just 2 weeks away. So stay in the Wolverine loop this winter and spring. Become a member today by visiting www.gbmwolverine.com. The best part is, it's free. If you get the show from iTunes, please take a minute to rate or review the show. iTunes loves the feedback. Our show app is now available in the iTunes Store, the Android Store at Amazon.com, and the Windows 8 App Store. You can also listen for free using 2 other very cool apps, Stitcher Radio and TuneInRadio.com. Just Google them, and I think you'd like both of those. They're very neat to use. So it's easier than ever to keep up on your Wolverines and take the show wherever you go. So check one of those apps out. Thanks to my guests today, Michigan radio play-by-play voice Matt Shepard and recruiting analyst Tim Sullivan from the Wolverine and Rivals.com. By next week's show, we'll know if Michigan is still in the Big Ten basketball race, and if we are, the game against the Spartans on February 23rd could go a long way in determining who wins the conference this year. So next week, we'll get Wolverine beat writer Brendan Quinn from MLive on and preview that big matchup at Chrysler Center. And because you never seem to get enough recruiting talk, we hope to have Ace Anbender on with us. Ace is the fine recruiting analyst from MGO Blog. So this week we heard Tim Sullivan's take on the class of 2014. Next week, Ace will give us his take on the class and any other recruiting news that's in the pipeline. That's it for today's show. Thanks for joining me, and we hope to have you right back here next week. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for listening to the Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine. You can find us on the web at www.gbmwolverine.com. That's www.gbmwolverine.com. For audio posts or other fan feedback, please call our listener line at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Email fan feedback to the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. That's the Michigan Man Podcast at yahoo.com. The Michigan Man podcast on GBMW Go Blue Michigan Wolverine is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan. The Michigan Man podcast is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!